Welcome to the Fellowship Podcast, a place where we have gospel conversations about loving God and transforming lives by following Jesus through life-on-life relationships. Thanks for tuning in. I know. That's what Romans 5 says, right?
Yeah.
Like suffering produces endurance, and then that creates character, and character creates hope. Like that suffering made you who you are today, and it made you the parents that you are. And it's amazing how God, when He is there and He's for you, right? What can be against you?
Yeah, exactly. Like Romans 8. Yeah. And I always love that part of that scripture. If God is for you, He could be against you.
Mm-hmm.
Neither principalities or darkness or anything, harm, disease, it doesn't matter. Go back a little bit I just want to go back and touch on something that I wanted to touch on about my growing up. I told you when I was age 12, I realized that, something was not right.
Mm-hmm.
I had my best friend, Ronnie Stewart, OD in high school when he was in ninth grade, scared the crap out of me. From that day on, I swore off I would never do any kind of synthetic drug.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying I didn't smoke some pot in high school, but I would not do cocaine, LSD. Back then, those drugs were popular.
Yeah.
And they were pretty common. I had a lot of friends that did them, but scared the snot out of me. Didn't want nothing to do with any kind of hard drug. Situations, got shot at on Bourbon Street one night. Almost got my stabbed one night on Bourbon Street. Being places I wasn't supposed to be. Dangerous places. Got shot at in the 9th Ward in New Orleans, went down there. Of course, we lived pretty close to New Orleans growing up in Picayune, Mississippi, so we went to New Orleans a lot as teenagers to party. And just wound up in places I shouldn't have been, but never got harmed. When I was in 9th grade, a drunk driver hit his head on at 80 miles an hour. I went through the windshield, landed in the back end of another truck, and wound up, only thing that happened to me, of course, if you look carefully at my forehead, I have scars here from the windshield, but my lip was tore off, and my lip was sewed back on. Doctor said I would be hair lip, never was. I have all the feeling. It's crazy. I don't know how all that happened, but it's the reason why I wear a mustache. My wife has never seen me without a mustache because I have this big scar all the way across. But the scar doesn't show. It's crazy. The really the miracle part of that story, we had an old carryall. I don't remember what people carry. Carryall was like the original Suburban. It was like a 65 carryall, and we used it to work around the farm. We had 11 acres that we grew up on, and we were fixing fences that day, and we had cut a bunch of 2x4s on 45s to brace poles. 4 of those were sticking through my seat this far. If I'd been buckled in, I would have been impaled by 4 of those.
Yeah.
I would have died. And Bruce, who was driving, to be honest with you, he was 14. I was 14. He should have been driving. But when they hit, he saw the car coming. All I remember is him saying, "Oh my God." And I looked up, I saw headlights. And Bruce, he just bent the steering wheel back, and it hit him in the sternum and bruised his sternum. But when we looked at the truck the next day, the motor was broken half. It was a 6-cylinder. Motor was broken half, folded all the way back into the turtle shell of the truck, but none of the cab collapsed back on us.
Wow.
Somehow, and these are old steel cars. They didn't have crumple zones. And so just, you got to realize God's providence in those things. And so I always refer to the book, the Narnia series. There's the book of the horse and the boy. Yeah, the horse and the boy. And there's a part of the story where he's on his journey, and he's riding the horse. It's the middle of the night, and it's storming, and he's riding, and he doesn't know where he's at, but he can sense there's a presence keeping him from going in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the story, he's riding back on the horse, and they're riding this cliff with this sheer drop down one side, and he realizes that was the night. That's where they were the night that he couldn't see where he was riding, and that there was a presence guiding and keeping him safe. And I kind of relate that to my early years, is that God was always there, just kind of shoving me to safety to keep me from going down that wrong path. And until I came to the point where I was ready to accept him. And so for people who are not saved that might listen to this, if that's happening in your life, you need to take the cues here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a story in that book. It's just one time the lion comes out and like swipes at him, right? And he has this great fear of it, but he's like, yeah, you wouldn't have ridden as fast. You wouldn't have been motivated to go as far if I hadn't come out, and it was Aslan motivating him, guiding him. Like you said, if you don't know the Lord, if you just look around, the signs are all there that he's there and pursuing you, and he wants to have a relationship with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But so getting back to my 30s, so we moved here. We moved here in 2000. 2001, we met Marty Mosier.
Yep.
We were going to Hayes Hills Baptist Church. Loved the church, had great, the Kim Bros were our Sunday school teachers, some of them just really good, salt of the earth, Christian heart, good, solid Christian people, great Sunday school teacher. Really always respect John immensely. David Sweet at the time was a pastor. Sean Civils was a youth guy. Me and Sean would get together every Friday morning and pray. Really love Sean, still love Sean to this day. Still just a great dude. But Miss Sherry and I were just discontent. We just felt this discontentment there.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong. Teaching was good. Life was good. But just felt this discontent that we wanted to do something. So we started visiting other churches. We found out real quick in every church in Austin that says it's a good Bible-believing church was. Especially when one of the pastors tell you, well, we don't think all the Bible's true. And we're like, really?
All right, next.
Okay, what part's not true? So we moved on, to say the least. And then finally, we just got so frustrated that we came back to the church. And then we approached Pastor Sweet and said, David, we would like to start a contemporary relational Sunday school class.
Okay.
And he was like, what do you mean? And we was like, well, relational. I mean, Sunday school class, we go, and not that there's not relationships there. It's just really not relational, It's typical Sunday school, And so we wanted to do something that was more contemporary, too. We wanted something that was going to be a little more life application, not just, this is what the word says, go figure out how to apply it. We wanted to be able to help. We want to be able to talk about how do we make this work? How do you deal with your kids doing this or that and other thing? And so, and he says, well, I got a better idea. He says, I met with this guy, Marty Mosier, the other night, and he's wanting to open a church kind of similar to what you're talking about. And so we met with Marty I think we went to the Red Lobster. And you think I can talk. You remember Marty?
Oh,
Marty
I know Marty. Marty was the founding pastor of Fellowship Church, for those
Marty
who maybe don't know that. But yeah, Marty could talk. I tell you what, he is a smooth talker, and I could only imagine how long that dinner lasted.
Yeah, but he was a bulldog. Marty, he had his canned presentations, and Marty was a foundation builder.
Yep.
That's what he was. He was a bulldog. He did not allow things to distract him. Probably one of the reasons why the foundation of his church was so well established by the time Jonathan took over was because Marty had built that. The group of people that started the church, we made sure that foundation was there. But we decided to come on board with Marty. I think it was the Halls, Sherry and I, the Tansies, and I think maybe Deborah Campamore.
Were the college Bickhams there yet?
The Bickhams came shortly after that. Yeah,
that was
pretty close. I can't remember. I think they were within a month. I don't know if they were with us when we were visiting other churches, because about the first. Until we started off in like January of 21, was that right, or 20?
I think November of 22 was the official service, but y'all started in January.
Yeah, we kind of started, and we were actually visiting other churches. We went to Cypress Creek, not Cypress Creek Church, but we went to a couple of cell churches up in Austin, one in Circle C, and a couple other places. And then we would meet at the Hall's house right here in Plum Creek. And we started out that way, and then we'd launched a church that fall at Rocking Horse Academy. And I can remember me and Kevin Wood built the stages. Them stages lasted forever. You talk about a God thing.
Yeah.
As much as we handled those things over the years, it was amazing.
We used them in Bethlehem for we still use them. Early years. Yeah.
So, you talk about 25 years or 4 years. But I remember we built them and we didn't measure the closet, and they fit perfectly in the closet. We're like, how do we do that? So, but that's when I realized that a lot of things I learned in life growing up, skill wise, God had put that in me for this church start. Because I wired lights, I ran cables, I hung screens. I never forget. I can't remember the guy's name. We rappelled from the ceiling in rappelling gear to hang the projector because we didn't have a lift. We built stages. We did all kinds of crazy stuff when the church first started. And Marty didn't have a mechanical bone in his body. He couldn't build or do anything. So I think God led us to here. Sherry, Sherry's a very good cook.
Yeah.
At that time, she would,
Hospitality.
hospitality. She would cook meals for the group meetings and church meetings. So we were so blessed by that. We worked so much into it. All of our kids were born into this church except for Victoria. Matthew and Joshua both were born in the church here at Plum Creek. They've never known another church, until now. I mean, they've gone to
moved
some churches.
away.
But it moved away. But they'd gone to church here. You were youth pastor for all of our kids. Of course, Jonathan came on board, and the church just made a monumental shift. But we've been through the mill with the church. Early on, Marty sent out some emails that were not well taken and lost some members, and we had people asking if they could serve beer at the life groups. We had people come in and kind of disrupt the church. We had people. We made mistakes. We confronted people when probably we shouldn't have them. We wind up losing friendship and people over things that we thought we probably should confront them about, and probably looking back, probably should not have. Had to ask for forgiveness from that stuff. Made a lot of mistakes.
I remember when early on, one of the things I love about Jonathan was just his humility and him wanting to establish elders, right? Which you were one of you and I think Eric Peruka, and Jonathan and John Partain and I were some of the very first kind of elders that were in the church and had to make some really tough decisions about staff things and even building the building that we're in right now. And just how I remember one time we had a meeting and said, well, guys, this is the right thing to do. And it might only be our 5 families on this Sunday morning. But if it is, then we know this is the right thing to do. And, God's that foundation that you're talking about was built, and God just continued to build on it, which has been amazing.
Yeah. One thing I've always loved about our church is we've stayed very biblically based. It's not about us, not about, one thing I love, I always tell people, if you're asked to be an elder, you're not going to be an elder.
Yeah.
Because you've got an agenda. One thing I love about our elder group, and it's probably still the same day, there's just no agendas. Don't come in with an agenda. It's all about what God desires. Our pastors that we've had, you, Jonathan, and Marty, all of you have been very, very receptive to elders. If they feel like that, that's not the direction we should go, then you're good with that.
Submit to
you submit to that, and so there's no egos there. Which is very important for a thriving and growing church. Love our churches that have started. There's been so many churches started off this church.
Yes.
I mean, there's been, Cornerstone and
Foundation Church,
2 Hope churches, church in Dripping Springs,
Foundation Church, Summit Church.
Just been so many churches come out of here. And of course, I know there's been times we've talked about adding on to the building and growing. I'm kind of like, it's not what we started out to do. Or it was always about growing to a point and then going out and starting another church and growing to a point. I always told our church is kind of a biblical or Christian pyramid scheme. Tell your neighbor, you get them saved, they tell their neighbor, and it just grows from there. It's not about...
And then we send you out in your neighborhood to do that kind of church.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, we taught life groups for many years, haven't done it in a while, but, did that for many years. We've had as many as 23 kids at our house bouncing on a trampoline.
Well, y'all have done just about everything. We hosted youth there. I took a group. I think we had like 19 ninth grade boys at your house one year. Then they're at my house the next year. And just all the adventures and so many different things to go through.
Yeah, our house, I always used to say, this is just an extension of the church over here. We've had groups so many times at the house. And so, Sherry, when we first bought the house and built it, it was brand new. And, we'd have 20 kids running rampant, and we had people ask us, wow, aren't you nervous they're going to tear you out? Like, it's God's house, not mine. God took care of it. Not a big deal. I don't know how a kid never got killed on that trampoline.
I know.
But we've been part of men's ministry over the years. The church is, I always tell everybody the thing that I keep in mind as the church has grown is that every baptism, every life saved, every heart changed, every healing ever done, everything. We've been a part of that because we stepped out in faith to start a church.
Yeah.
And the challenge I give to people when you get asked to start a church, or you go, you feel the urge to do that or the leading to do that, remember that.
Yeah.
That over the years, as you watch it grow and as you watch people get saved and lives change and kids grow up and needs met and people moved and everything, in a little bit of way, you've had a hand in every bit of that.
Yeah.
Because you stepped out on faith early on. Starting a church is not easy. Ask anybody that's done it. John Pertain, Jonathan Leftwich. You know, as good as Jonathan is, there's challenges. I'm sure he's had challenges.
Yep.
I'll never forget when him and Marty started talking about him taking over. Him and Marty butted heads pretty hard, but I will give Marty some props there. He humbled himself and he stepped down because he knew it was God. That was God's leading. And so, even though Marty was a little bit of a bulldog, he was a godly man, and so, the A Bears have been here, Eddie and I have been like brothers for years. Going back to, I've had godly men in my life. Eddie was a godly man, very quiet guy, but still very godly man. Not many people know him as well as I do. And then there's, Paul Lyon, of course, Paul, who's got Alzheimer's now, which is it's very hard to watch. Been like a father and a brother to me. Learned so much from watching him raise his kids. He's 72, so he's 12 years older than me. But just to watch this godly man raise his children and walk in just quiet humbleness all the years I've known him. And so, but through all this, God blessed my business beyond measure. I mean, I started out with 700 members. I probably have 3,500 clients now. And so God has blessed us.
But I think one of the reasons God's been so kind and blessed y'all is you've blessed so many people through your home, through your life, through just the way that you help other people. God's faithful to that, and He knows that you're not going to use it for your own sake, right? It's like when God sees that heart that's right, and coming from a situation, a family where you were content with nothing. Like we're committed to you staying home, Sherry, whether we have 30,000 or whether we have 60,000, it doesn't matter. And God rewards that faithfulness because He knows it's going to be used for His kingdom work, and props for that.
Yeah, And, the funny thing is that the longer you walk in it, the more more this comes habit. I think that's the other thing that people need to keep. Using your gift, if the more you get to use it, I volunteer for Minutemen, which is disaster recovery. Talk about recharging my battery. I go spend 4 days mucking out houses in South Louisiana after a hurricane. It's brutal work, but man, it just fills my tank. It just makes me feel, and I know that's just God's thing, and so.
Or even like after Eric passed away and getting an opportunity in the honey house to help Terry and Mona and Elizabeth and their family out was like such a joy about those things when you're in your gift. Like I came that one time to help you move a few things. It wasn't the joy of my life, but it was the joy of your life. So I enjoyed living like through you and seeing the joy that it brought you. It's like, praise the Lord, because I have a little bit of helps in me. I like that, but not the same as like when I see you. It brings you such joy, and that's an encouragement for everybody that when you have a gift, like don't squash it. Just use it and find a way to use it, and don't always wait for permission. Like, hey, I'm going to come out and help you with this, and I'm going to do this because that's what God's gifted me to do.
Guys, and of course, being self-employed, I get to set my own schedule. I've got really good staff. Jamie's been with me 20-something years. She's like a sister to me. We're like family. We're not employee, even though I pay her. She's like family. And then Abby, who works for me, Abby's a little quirky, but, she's been with me a long time, and I trust her completely. So I know I can lead my business, and it's taken care of. Matter of fact, they tell me to go fishing all the time. But I know that, so I have the ability to go do that stuff. Which a lot of people don't.
Right.
But and so I think God blessed me that, just like mission stuff. Me, I've never been a foreign mission guy. I never felt the desire. Went on a mission. How I met Eric Ream and really got to know him was went on a mission trip with him last year. And to be honest with you, still don't have the bug. But what I did learn is because God has blessed me, I can bless others who want to go. And so, so I do that as much as I possibly can.
Eric would always say that, right? Pray, sin, go. We're all those different parts of it. And so.
But I'll be honest with you, doing the Ream house was, to me, the important part of that is that I think when I was at the hospital, I think it was a few weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks before he passed away, I was talking to him there, and we were talking about, I asked him, I said, anything I can do for you, anything that you need done at home. And then they brought up the idea of the house. And I said, don't worry about it. It gets taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all I said. And then, of course, I got to pray with him. And I could see in his face that it brought some peace to him.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was the biggest joy from that. It wasn't doing the job or anything. It was just that knowing that it brought some peace to his mind, knowing that his parents would have we would get that place done for him. Because I know he had worked a lot on it already. He'd done a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, Elizabeth told me he wasn't very handy, but from the work I saw he did, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
And so, and just a caveat, I'm not a carpenter. I'm not a painter or anything. I can just paint. I can nail a board together. And that just goes to show you don't have to be good at something. I always tell my kids, all through their life, is that you don't know if you can do something unless you try to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been my philosophy. I can't lay tile, but I can try, make mistakes, and figure it out. And that's a big thing for me with people. I think some people just have a fear of stepping out doing things because they're afraid they're going to fail. Okay, so what?
Yeah.
God will help you through it. Of course, you got YouTube now. Heck, you can do anything on YouTube.
I know, it's crazy.
Going back a little bit in the process, of course, you know this. A lot of people may not know this, but I had a heart attack when I was 46.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the gym working out and collapsed at the gym, and pretty good scare.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it'll wake you up having a heart attack, laying on a table, watching them put stents in you on a screen in the hospital. But again, God was there. I was in the locker room by myself, began to feel bad, collapsed. Guy just happened to walk in, was an EMS guy. Recognized it immediately. I was at the YMCA in Buda. Well, what's down at the end of the road to YMCA? Fire station.
Yep.
And they were at the YMCA within 3 minutes, had me on a stretcher, had me on oxygen, gave me some nitroglycerin, got me to and of course, Seton Hospital had only been open like a year.
Yeah, not long.
And so they took me to Seton, and Kyle, just so happened, Dr. Michael Watkins, who's the head of cardiology for Seton at the time, for the whole Seton, was there. Yeah. He was my surgeon.
Yeah.
So within 30 minutes, they had stents in. And then, as you know, it was like a week later, I was back in the gym working out.
You were.
It was like nothing happened. I could tell it, but it was.
You weren't quite as strong.
I wasn't quite as. But I did have anxiety for a while. It took me a while to get over the anxiety of that, because every time I get indigestion or something, I feel it. I would just like, oh wow. And finally, God just gave me a peace about that. But that scared me to death. But to get to some fun stuff.
Yeah.
So y'all know a little bit about the family situation. My birth certificate always had who I thought was my mother's name on it, Dolores Hidalgo. I always said that I had a brother, but I always figured she had lied. I'll be honest with you, because if you're going to give a child away, not legally right then, and I know her intentions were for me to be adopted, but I always thought in the back of my mind, are you going to tell the truth on the birth certificate? So I spent years trying to find her. I had a friend of mine that I went to church with in Dallas, who was one of the top crime investigators for the city of Dallas, and he got in trying to find her, couldn't find her. I did all kinds of things to find her, but finally just gave up. It's like, you know what, whatever, I'm done with this stuff. And so just figured I would go on in life, and I want to go back to the forgiveness thing real quick before I get to that. I never talked about forgiving Evelyn.
Yeah.
You remember we did a couple of encounter weekends with Cypress Creek Church, and never forget, one of the encounters was, is there somebody you need to forgive? Go out and give it to God. And so, of course, Evelyn was dead by then, and so I made my peace with forgiving her, because I never forgave her. I always blamed Dad for everything, Bruce for everything. I never realized that, talking about no tenderness and all that kind of stuff, growing up from a mother, that was a big effect too.
Yeah.
And so I was able to go outside and just dump that all out to God and forgive and move on past that too. But I believe God, I always tell people, if I ever wrote a book about my life, I would name it God's Timing and His ability to redeem a life. Yeah. Because my life is all about God's timing. It's always been about, when I look back on it, golly, I know reason why God waited till then. I realize why God waited till then. I realize why I was almost 30 before I could forget. I realized why. And then I realized why. So getting back to my biological family. So when I was 53, which is, 7 years ago, um, May or April of April of that year, 2018, I decided I was going to do the Ancestry.com's little DNA test to see what nationality. All I care about was knowing what nationality it was. So I sent it in, and wound up, of course, about what I figured. I've got some Western Europe, which is France. I got Spanish in me. I've got some Greek. I've got some Italian. I got some Irish. But majority, come to find out, my biological family migrated to Louisiana in 1600s from the Canary Islands off the coast of Spain. And so, but what I didn't realize was that whenever you do that, there are people on there who are building their family trees who put their information in the system so that you can contact them and let them know, hey, look, I'm part of your family tree. And so I had a second cousin in Houston, Texas, who she had put her information on there, and she'd been, pretty substantial, about 3,500 people in her trees.
Well,
yeah, huge. My biological family is huge. And so my mom was one of 11 children. And so, and her mother was a Philippe, and my great grandmother was a Philippe. And so, very French oriented, but my granddad was a Hidalgo, Spanish. And so, um, but anyway, so what happened is I emailed her and I said, well, hey, my name is Ron Limely, and my mother is Dolores Hidalgo. I believe my mother's Dolores Hidalgo. I've never met them. I think I have a brother named Randy. Do you know these people? And she says, yeah, I know your whole family. I went, holy cow. I said, well, do you know if I can, how I can contact them? She says, why don't you let me ask them first before you call? I said, okay, that's fine. And so, and I want everybody to realize there's no malice toward my mother whatsoever. I don't want anybody to think bad about her. I completely understand what happened, why she did what she did. I have no malice toward that whatsoever. But when she contacted my mom, Dolores, she denied it flat out. Flat out denied it. And so I was like, well, okay, here we go. And so, but Sherry found my brother Randy up in Tennessee. He had a Facebook account, found him. And she said, well, he's yours because look at him. I was like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And so anyway, so I said, well, you know what? If mom doesn't want to admit it, I have a right to know my brother. And so I wrote him a letter, sent it to him. And of course, I had to explain, look, I don't want anything. I'm happy. I've got a great family. I've got a great career. I don't need nothing. I just want to know who I am and where I come from. And would like a relationship if possible. And so he got the letter. Of course, he thought it was all a bunch of crap. But his wife said, well, let's look him up online. And she looks at it, she goes, oh my God, y'all are brothers. And so Randy winds up calling mom, and he says, well, mom, this guy Rod Limely called me or sent me a letter and blah, blah, blah. He says, I knew by the silence on the phone that it was true.
Yeah.
As you remember, nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
Nobody
she denied it.
So she admitted it. And so Sherry and I were actually in the backyard of a house in Wimberley, Texas. We were looking at trying to buy a new house. We were going to move out of Kyle. And we were standing there with our realtor, David Ruth. And you got to realize David's a character. And we were standing there, and she calls me. And of course, my mom's got this voice that kind of, resonates. And she gets up and says, Rod, this is Dolores. And me and Sherry just tell her with our eyes about this thing. And David is sitting there going, what? Yeah. And I looked at him and said, David, I've got to take this call. Y'all talk. And so we talked for a few minutes on the phone. I said, Dolores, at the time she had not earned the right for mom, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a unique situation. Mm-hmm. And I told her, I said, well, I'm with the realtor right now looking at a house. Can I call you later? And so she said, sure. And so I called her back later, and we began to talk. And, I explained to her, I don't have any malice. I'm not angry, not mad. I don't want anything. I just want to know you. I want to know my family. I want to know where I come from, who I am, all that kind of stuff. And she said, well, there's a family reunion coming up in June. Well, this is like May, And I was like, okay. I said, would we be invited to come? She says, well, sure, you invited to come. And so like I said, I have a lot of cousins, a lot of first cousins, a lot of them. And so Sam, who's one of my cousins, very just, she's very, she's done well in life. She's an engineer, sold a business. She's done really well, lived in this big old giant house down in Baton Rouge area. And she invites us, yeah, y'all just come and stay at my house, make yourself at home. Didn't know us from Sam.
Yeah.
Didn't know us from nobody. So we get there, and the first person we meet is my Aunt Kathy, the most precious person on the planet. Just incredible, accepting, just, everybody loves Aunt Kathy. And she's married to Uncle Frank, who's the loudest and just boisterous and just crazy guy you ever want to meet. And so it was just hilarious because it was just like home.
Mm-hmm.
And so we met most of the family. Be honest with you, I've had several aunts pass away and uncles pass away since. 2 uncles and an aunt, and aunts passed away since then. So I got to meet all of my mother's brothers and all my uncles and aunts and uncles but one, and he passed away years ago. I missed meeting my grandmother by 1 year. My mom did marry eventually to Mr. Conley. He passed away years ago. But it was funny because I'm sitting here talking to all these people, and it's just like I've always been part of the family. It was weird as heck. And then I never forget we're driving home from Baton Rouge back here, and it was almost instantaneous. All the kids and Sherry all went, "Oh my God, you're just like them, and you've never spent a day with them."
Yeah,
and it was hilarious. And she was right. My mannerisms, the way I talk, my sense of humor, all of that stuff was, it was just like I'd been raised in that house all my life. But the story behind this is just what I want people to understand from this is that if talking about God's timing, if I would have found her 10 years later, probably wouldn't have been as good an outcome earlier because I was still angry.
Yeah.
I had not come to that place of grace and mercy and acceptance of understanding of why she did what she did, especially after finding out that it was a great family.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't abusive.
But you hadn't learned about forgiveness yet.
Yeah,
you hadn't had peace and forgiveness for Bruce and Evelyn and all these things.
Well, I did. I had before that, but I was still kind of angry at her.
I know. But I was like that. I think that paved the road for God to help you have that great relationship.
And to this day, we have a great relationship. Now she's my mom now. She calls me all the time, talks, and Randy, my brother, and I, we both love to fish, and we matter of fact, we just spent a week with him up in Tennessee, and love him to death. He's such a dear person, and him and I are a lot alike in how we love our children and be a big part of our children's lives. And he's got a poor guy. He didn't get married till he was 33, and his wife that he married had 2 kids, and they had to do the drugs for having. They want to have a baby of their own. Well, they wound up having quads. Yeah, so he went from 0 kids to 6 kids in 12 months.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, man, you're a glutton for punishment. But love Randy to death. He's a dear person. Love getting to know him, having a brother in my life. So just God's way of just timing and stuff. And, just tell everybody, it's just so weird or so awesome how God does that. Blackaby always talked about in the book, Experiencing God, putting down those markers where God does something in your life and you put down an altar to remember that. And, I go back through my life and there's so many altars and so many times where God works. And I've probably missed so many things lessons I've learned. And, I kind of made some notes trying to make sure I don't, miss anything. I think, like I said before, kind of closing up here, by the way, I have 3 beautiful children, three grown children. My daughter's 27. She's an athletic trainer. I got a younger son who's 21. He's going to school right now. He wants to be a music studio engineer or technician. And then my oldest son, he's living my best life up in Idaho, fishing and loving it, fishing and hunting, living every day. But anyway, kids have been challenging. Anybody who has kids through teenage years and grown up, it's been a wild ride. Learned so much from my children. Didn't always do it right. Some of my dad came out of me growing up with them. I could be short tempered with them. I could be impatient with them. Um,
But
had to
through
act,
love, because you've loved them,
Oh yeah,
loved them
yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if you ever came to the house. A couple of times we've had to come people pray over the house because we felt like there was something
Yeah,
evil in our home, which I think there was a couple of times.
yeah, we've
Uh,
been there. John and I've been there a couple
yeah,
different times.
yeah, yeah, and then of course, um, you've helped me through some of the stuff with one of my boy kids,
Mhm.
who's
Yep,
he's made some crazy decisions in his life, but still a great kid, great
we love
hearted
him.
kid.
Mhm.
Love him to death, but just he's a typical guy, just doesn't think through.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's kids, right? We all
yeah,
have these stories of our
yeah,
kids, and man, God's luckily just been such a
yeah,
blessing
yeah. He's
to our kids.
protecting them.
And
Never forget getting the call 11:30 night. Hey, Dad, I'm upside down in the truck. Can you come and get me? And we're like, well,
yeah,
so but again, that baggage came along with me.
hmm
And no matter how much, we give that over to God, it'll creep back in. Satan will creep that stuff back in
yeah,
on you. A lot of the scriptures I talk to the kids about today is bringing every thought captive to God. One thing I'm talking about with the boys now. When I was a child, I acted like one. Now it's act like a man.
hmm
Time to grow up. And I'm not saying you can't be young. I'm just saying it's time to think about the things that are important and make decisions on that. Just
yeah,
don't blame it on, well, I'm young and I can get away with it. Um, Victoria haven't had to do a lot of it because she's always been more mature than she should be. Um, but another thing that I think another gifting that I have is simple faith. I tell Chris Cherry all the time because you know how detailed Cherry can get with teaching, and how much he knows the Bible. And I always tell him, I'm a life application guy. I don't need to know all the reasons why. All I need to know is that God says so.
yeah,
I don't. This is me. I'm not
yep,
saying that I don't learn, I don't study, I don't do all that stuff. All I'm saying is that it's just simple faith for me.
yeah.
God says so, I'm good with it. I don't
Amen.
need you to explain all that stuff to me.
And
I
that's
don't
a gift.
Yeah, I don't need to know the word study. I don't need to know all the numbers that go into it. And, even though I enjoy hearing all that stuff and it's really, I love history. So really to me, the Bible comes alive to me because I love the history of it. But I'm just simple faith.
Yeah.
You know, God said, I think it says, I can't remember if it's Proverbs or Psalms, it says, God values obedience over sacrifice.
Yep.
And it's just simple obey. Now, I'm not saying I always obey. I don't. I stumble. I let my pride get in the way. You'll still hear me say, man, I built this business. And I always, wait,
Yeah.
God and I built it. God through me built it. I always have to catch myself because I always want to take that glory back to myself. And so
Mhm.
pride is still a very difficult thing. For years, lust was a problem,
Mhm.
because not that I ever want to act on it, but, because of the way I was raised and it was
Yeah.
very sexual and, you can do all that stuff when you were kids. That was always something I had to struggle with. And, I still, when I go to the YMCA, I do a class there called Body Pump. I always make sure I sit right up front.
Yep.
I'm not going to be in the back. I'm just not
Yep.
going to do it,
You gotta
and
guard your
so
eyes.
got to guard your eyes. Um, and so simple faith, and I wrote down here, simple faith is important for a consistent attitude.
Mhm.
I think this other thing that God blessed me with was a positive attitude. I very seldom ever see things from it. I always try to look at the bright side. I mean, always, I'm a half guy, and I don't know where that comes from.
Well,
I'm sure it's
it's
a
part
gift
of the
from God.
but it's part of the survival because that other
Yeah,
stuff would have just torn you up,
yeah, yeah. And
right?
then,
And
like I
so
said, and when you're in that situation, you go to one of two ways. You either go down the drain or you don't.
right. And
You
so
rise it.
you've
Yeah,
responded with a positive
yeah,
attitude.
yeah,
I'm not gonna let this other stuff get me down
yeah,
because you've had a lot of that in your life that could
yeah,
have destroyed you.
yeah,
And you've said, "No, I'm gonna overcome,
yeah,
and I'm gonna choose to honor the Lord in the good and the horrific."
yeah,
You know?
yeah. And so, yeah, it's been a challenge. That's been to me, that's always been kind of easy,
Mhm.
which I'm happy for.
Yeah, praise the Lord.
Yeah.
It's not easy for a lot of us.
Being thankful is important.
Mhm.
I'm a pretty thankful person. I love, every day morning I get up, first thing is God, thank you. Look where I'm at. Look
Yeah.
where I started. Look where I'm at.
Yeah.
It's just, if you would have known me as a kid and you knew how I grew up in the house I grew up in and where I'm at today, you know, um,
Well,
you
that's part of
know,
that redemption arc you were talking about earlier, right before we began, right? Was that God can redeem
yeah,
anything,
yeah,
right? He
yeah,
can turn it, your story. in your life and the situation you grew up in, that doesn't have to define you.
No.
God gets to define you.
Yeah, and of course that was kind of want to be my final. The point is that, I don't want to offend anybody here. I don't want to, but, um, and I know my mom and I know her family. Abortion was never a thought in her mind. Okay, when we were born, but in today's world, it's very real. And I'm a prime example that God can redeem any situation, no matter how you get here.
Yeah.
God, you're important to God. It says He formed you in the womb. He formed you for a purpose. And so it could be for me to sit here right now for this one moment in life. Doesn't matter. But God can redeem a life. God can redeem a person, any situation, no matter how horrific. Because I know my situation was tough, but there's stuff out there that's just unfathomable that I couldn't imagine. And coming through and living through, and God can redeem all of that. And we've heard stories about that. We know Christian people who've been through that.
We know people in our church who've gone through some of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's incredible.
Just incredible what these people. I mean, I know from befriending the Marines and some of the stuff that they've seen and help people through. I can't imagine. And I grew up pretty tough, and so but God can redeem that and use it to make a better world, make better people. My children, are blessings to me, and hopefully they'll grow up to be blessings to others. And so I just think that's real important to the end on.
Yeah.
Is guys now going forward, and I'll say this: if y'all want to pray for me, I'm 60 years old, and I'm at the point in my life where I'm ready for the next stage of life.
Yeah.
Now, my kids are grown. They're doing pretty well. I'm not saying that they're done, but, I'm starting to look at, okay, God, what's next?
Yeah.
Where my business, I may sell my business, I may not, by the time, but I don't want to retire.
Right.
I want to do something, and so, and I want to do something that furthers God's kingdom and, I can use my gifts. And so I'm working toward that. I'm starting to think about that. Sherry and I have started talking about it. And so it could be right here.
Could be anywhere.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned to me about starting another church. I'm like,
well, we're going to be doing that here in not too long. It's Fellowship Church, so who knows?
I know Cherry's been talking to me about it a little bit. I'm like, ooh.
I don't know if I'm ready. Yeah.
But anyway, but if God tells us to, we'll do it. You know?
And that's the theme of life, right? Is if God tells us. I remember interviewing for this job after Jonathan left. I go, well, I mean, if God wants me to be here for a week or 5 years or 10 years, then okay. If that's what He wants me to do, then I'll do it for as long as He wants me to do it. And so,
and, another thing is, I appreciate you guys so much. Our staff is so good. Our staffs have always been so good. You guys work so great together, love each other. Such a diverse group of guys, from Paul's gentleness to your ability to teach, to Cherry's knowledge of the Bible, and his ability and his desire just to reach people is just so crazy and so passionate. And then you've got Jaden's so good with the kids, and I always thought it was going to be impossible to replace you in the youth group. You were so good with the kids. So many great guys in our church, Shane Christ and those guys. We have so many great people here, and we've been able to watch it grow. And I never forget, I was sitting about 4 weeks ago, was here one Sunday, and I was talking to a new couple, and they said, well, how long have you been here? And I was like, well, I've been here quite a while. She said, well, do you know many people? I said, well, it's gotten big enough to where I really don't know that many people anymore. And then about 7 people come up, hey, Ron, how you doing? I thought you said you didn't know him. I was like, well, I guess.
Well, we've sent out a lot of people over the years. We really have.
We have.
The church from the beginning to now has been so and I wasn't even there in the beginning. I came in, I think, year 6, maybe, first year in Negley, and man, just to see how good God's been, that through all of that, it's like, wow. It's
Shelley Pulliam, such a gracious and prayer warrior. Who else? Linda Freeman. Oh my God. If I need prayer, I'm calling Linda.
Yeah.
Her prayers sound like gospel.
I know.
She is so wonderful and been such a faithful member of our church for so many years. So many great people here. A lot of people probably don't know, but if you tore all the sheetrock and stuff off the walls, every one of these beams have scripture written all over them. I remember when we were building this church, and I remember the mistake I had in kind of pushing a contractor to start building a church when we were doing it, and it turned out that they wound up being a problem.
Yeah.
And so, I felt so bad about that. I was
But
like,
God brought us through that.
yeah, he did.
I mean,
And he did. And Eric wound up building a church for us and wound up costing a whole lot less money.
Yeah, but praise the
wound
Lord.
up, turning out to be a much better situation. And so, over the years, I made mistakes in the growth of the church. And, I can remember doing we never did vacation Bible school. What do we call it? I can't remember.
We did backyard Bible clubs.
Backyard Bible Club. Yeah, I remember my Lord those things every summer. Family camps. Remember the original family camp?
People want us to bring it back. By the way,
really,
they want us to bring back family camp. So maybe
the old
next
family
year.
camp.
Yeah, the old
school family camp. Those were so much fun.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Mohan and all those guys. They were hilarious. Of course, Jonathan Partain. He's doing a new church. The church
He's doing church down in San Antonio.
I did the insurance for him. He came and asked me to do insurance for him, and I went out there and visited. Nice church, great people. Yeah. I think he's going to do really well out there.
Me too.
Love John, one of the most talented people I've ever known. Musically, he is incredible,
and most gentle souls you'll ever meet.
Yeah,
very genuine guy. Him and Cherie, just
we've seen
amazing.
Yeah, I've seen so many good staff people come there. Denby Cherry was an incredible music guy. Hated to see Denby go. He was so good. Golly, there's been so many people come and go. And so, we've kind of just stayed the course.
Yep, stayed the course.
Yeah, and
we're not finished the race yet, though.
Yeah, I always told Marty, I said, if we would have visited Cypress Creek Church, we may have never stayed here early on. Funny thing is when we moved to Wimberley, we thought we were going to go back over to Cypress Creek Church when we moved to Driftwood, but we decided not, God just wants us to do that. I think the other thing that people tend to do is just because you're not always happy with your church doesn't always mean you move. There might be a reason, like when we were discontent with Hayes Hills, we looked at leaving, but we didn't. We came back and made a proposal, and then he said, well, I think God's leading you to go do this.
Yeah.
And so it's not always about, when you're discontent with a church that you leave it.
Right.
Sometimes you need to work through the process.
And help it change. If it needs to change, help it change, right? Or if we need to change, God can use that to change something in us too.
Yeah. So we're in that transition of our lives. And, I tell people, I never thought when we started the church in our 30s that I'm sitting here at 60 talking about 25 years of a church.
I know, right? When it's in the living room and you're starting out, it's like, man, I don't think Plum Creek planned on that either. We got our little 3 acres here, and God's just done, Craig, we we've done Focus Sports Camp here now with 400 and something kids, and it's like Bethlehem with thousands of people that come through Bethlehem every year. I had
the pleasure of doing the sports camp.
You haven't yet, but now that you're in your next phase of life, you're going to be in charge of that. So
I think I keep telling you, I got to work.
Yeah, I know. You keep telling me that. But Matt, Rod, we're so thankful for you and Sherry and your family. And thank you for being one of the founding people over all these years of being faithful and through it all. And we've seen, I think even about Night in Bethlehem, the lights, the early years, the grid, the grid patterns. And now there's these things called LED lights where we could I'll plug them in.
I can remember we started out, it was like, 6 generators?
6 generators.
I remember it took me a whole week to set up lighting.
Yep.
Now it takes us 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, we're done in a half a day pretty much.
Just the overhead light. But I remember when we started out, oh my Lord. And then you would always trip breakers and you're running around every night. You'd have a set of lights, trip a breaker. You'd have to go trip a breaker on a generator, making sure generators are full of gas. I would be exhausted by the end of the week. By the end of it, I was done.
And luckily we only had, a few hundred people come through in those early years. And then
Bob
every
Nunn,
year,
the nuns and the boys clearing the land. I helped them do that. They did most of it. I just came out, with some of the brush clearing. But I can remember Bob and the boy, Mark Boyd and him coming out here and working and clearing the land. And I never thought that we would see what we're seeing now. Matter of fact, Jonathan Leftwich will tell you that first time that little Ethan ever did a donut, the pickup truck was in this parking where the church sits.
Yeah.
We did a donut in my truck out here. Jonathan's looking at me like,
I remember that first shovel going in the ground.
Oh yeah,
and we're probably going to build something here. Wow, I can't even.
Yeah, I remember Marty and his little brick idea and all that stuff. Yeah, that was pretty.
I remember renting the pool house every week to have a youth group in it back in the day. So
rattlesnake in the tree.
Yeah, story after story, but God's been faithful. So.
Yeah, He has. Yeah, God has blessed Bethlehem. It's been such an awesome thing to see. And even though I complain about the lights, I really enjoy doing it. I mean, I've been doing it forever, but it's the girls at the office always go, all right, it's getting that time of year. You let us know when you're going to take off. I was like, all right. Good thing is my office is just right here.
Yeah, just right across the street.
Yeah, so I can hop over here, do what I need to do for half a day, and we've got it streamlined down pretty well. So, but still enjoy walking through and seeing the people and watching them enjoy it, and the dancing, and just the camaraderie of it all, and just the peacefulness of it all. It's worth every year we've done it. It's worth every bit of the work that goes into it, and splinters, and burnt lights, and bulb changing, and
Well, because and I think you summed it up really well earlier when you talked about being a part of this church plant, was to see a life changed, to see healing, to see relationships reconciled, to see Christ be made more of, then that's what it's all about. And whether it's Bethlehem or Focus or Path Group, or you've seen it was Cell Group, then it was Life Group, then it's Path Group. Like, you've seen it all.
I don't know what to call it anymore. It's just a group of people meeting at the house, eating food, talking about Jesus.
Yeah, and so whatever it is, like, God's been faithful, and so
and it's been fun as being older, sitting in with younger groups. I've enjoyed that with Chris, because a lot of the people that do his groups are usually a little bit younger, and so it's been fun to sit down and get to know Dante and his family, and golly, Big Joe and his wife, and we've sit in with some of those younger people, and and I know sometimes they probably think I'm a little overpowering in the groups, but it's been fun to sit with them and learn from them and this generation, because I grew up, I grew up in a different generation, and so and the other thing is that we take for granted years of walking with God, how much people don't know. Because I'm not saying that the people sitting in the groups are not God people, but they just don't know a lot about. They haven't walked with God long enough to know what we know.
And we were there.
Yeah, we've been there. We've walked through those struggles. I always tell people, I laugh all the time when people talk about, toddlers are so hard. I'm like, you get teenagers. It's a whole different world.
Learn now. Yeah.
At least you can control a toddler. You can keep him in a space.
Yes,
but yeah. So that's been fun, and I've grown as much from just being around them, and it affects me. I tell I can never go to my 60th birthday. I told everybody, I said, it just amazes me where God has brought me from to where I'm at today. If you would have told me when I was 20 that I'd be where I'm at today, I'd tell you, you're mind. Yeah, you got to be kidding me. There ain't no way. I can sincerely say, if it weren't for God's foundation in our marriage, Sherry and I would not still be married.
Yeah.
If I wasn't saved, even though we're both stubborn and we don't give up on anything, I think there would have come a point where we would just went on our own separate ways without knowing that, we had that foundation of God. We didn't have people in our lives who said, hey, look, this is normal. You're going through normal struggles as a married couple. You just need to learn how to communicate better and deal with that. And so, because that really in the secular world probably really doesn't happen. Unless you just have godly parents who grew up, that have some, they're really involved in your life. You probably don't have those people around you. In the church, that's what you get with the church.
Right. That's what you should have.
Get that. Yeah. Especially if you have a relational church, that you have relationships with people.
Yeah.
That you get that. You get that person who's able to meddle in your life.
Right. And exactly. That'll step in when you don't want them to. Yeah,
exactly. They're willing to tell you something you don't want to hear, And so we've been fortunate that we've had those people around us. And so, and like I said, we value everybody here. We love this church, and
what's incredible to think about is that we were the young couples.
Yeah.
When we came here, we were the younger couples, and now we're the
older state
fogies now. Elder statesmen. So
I did pull my stuff out of my balls.
I know. Well, Rod, we love you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, guys. Let me pray for you and pray for this next phase. And
thank you,
thanks for sitting and talking and sharing your story. It's an incredible
I'm sure
story.
There's stuff I forgot and points I want to make, but
Yeah, and if people want to know more, they just come talk to you. We'll see you every Sunday. So, Lord, I thank you so much just for Rod and just, Lord, his story of redemption, Lord, how you can take anything, Lord, and redeem it. And what an incredible story, Lord. Rod, when people would see him, they would just know him as this incredible man who loves to help, and it seems like he has it all together, Lord. But you have taken him through an incredible journey, Lord, from forgotten and invisible to being known and being someone who disciples and encourages others, Lord. And is a blessing to so many people's life and has a simple faith, Lord. So I just pray that you'll continue to encourage him and guide him and lead him in whatever this next phase is of life, Lord, whether it's more years of insurance or, Lord, you have something else you want him to do. Lord, just make it clear to him and continue to speak to him and Sherry. I pray for their kids, Lord, for Victoria and Matthew and Joshua, Lord. Just pray that you'll bless them and encourage them in every endeavor that they go through, and continue to help them, Lord, be successful in what they do in life, and help them to continue to just love you with all of their heart. So, Lord, thank you for this time, and thank you for this church and the foundation that was laid by Rod and Sherry and that early on group, Lord, and Marty and Jonathan, and so many, Lord. Thank you for Fellowship Church and what you've made it into. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.